This is Gerardo Del Real with Resource Stock Digest. Joining me today is the president and CEO of Alianza Minerals, Mr. Jason Weber. Jason, how are you this morning?
I'm doing very well, Gerardo. Thanks.
Thank you for coming on. Alianza is a company that I am very familiar with. I'm also very familiar with you. I've been following you since way back in the Kiska days. I think I still have stock certificates somewhere from potential warrants that never turned into anything because of the bear market. But Alianza is a new company to a lot of people, and it's new because, frankly, you're at the busiest this year and probably as busy as you've been in the past 5 or 6 years. Is that accurate, Jason?
Yeah, it definitely is accurate. It's a combination of us, some hard work that we put in the last 2, 3, 4 years. It's sort of culminating right now, but then you sort of add on to that the recent uptrend in the metal price, especially gold and silver, and that's really helped us out. It's made for a busy year.
Let's talk a little bit about your background. Jason, can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I'm a geologist by training. I graduated from University of British Columbia here in Vancouver, and went right into the mining business. Started as a consultant with a consulting firm called what was then called Equity Engineering, and it's probably where I got my first taste of sort of the joint venture business model, because one of Equity's approaches to business was when times were slow, they would generate exploration ideas, targets, concepts, and then take them to prospective clients, sell them on the idea, and then the client would take the project on and Equity would get the work out of it. And so I was exposed to that very, very early in my career. And in fact, we were involved as Equity in a discovery called Wolverine, a massive sulfide deposit in Yukon Territory.
Yep.
And we watched everybody around us do well off the discovery, and we were sort of left, wow, we could do this for ourselves. So we started up our own junior company. It was called Rimfire Minerals, which we then merged with a company called Geoinformatics to form Kiska, which you mentioned earlier. And I ended up running both Rimfire and its successor, Kiska, as president and CEO, and largely operating under the joint venture business model, although that changed a little bit with Kiska. I think we just sort of put it on steroids, I like to say. and then when I left there, I ended up taking a little bit of time and looking at who I might want to work with. And I had known Mark Brown for quite a while, and we had sort of talked on and off about someday doing something together. So I got together with Mark, and he had a company that called Estrella Gold, whose CEO at the time wanted to be a geo. He didn't want to be a CEO, and he and I met, and I ended up taking over the CEO role from him, and that started my tenure here with Mark, which continues to this day. Mark's our chairman, and we merged Estrella with another company that he was involved with called Tarsus. Mm-hmm. Tarsus had projects in the Yukon and in Nevada, and Estrella, the company I was running, had projects in Peru. So we put the two companies together with this focus on sort of the Cordilleran regions of North and South America, looking at the belt of mountains that runs up sort of the west coast of both continents. And that's really sort of been the focus for us jurisdictionally, because one, those are some of the best places to work, but two, it's also very well endowed geologically. So this is, we feel is a very good place to look for metals, especially gold and silver, which is what we mostly do now.
You mentioned Mark Brown. I'm obviously very familiar with Mark for probably, I want to say 11 or 12 years now, if I'm not mistaken. He also sits on the board of Almaden Minerals, who is arguably one of the more successful project generators in the space. That, of course, is the same model that Alianza follows. I have to mention John Wilson, who I know is a director on Alianza, who I'm also very familiar with. Top-notch geo, over 40 years experience, as picky as they get in the business, not only his projects, but who he works with. Can you talk about John just a bit?
Well, so when I mentioned that Mark had a CEO who wanted to go back to being a geo, that was John.
I know the story.
I hadn't met John prior to getting involved with Estrella, and we chatted on the phone one day and hit it off right away. And it was really nice because for me, I knew when you walk into a new situation, there's a whole corporate memory there that you don't possess. Yep. So having John around, available, part of the team, has been really important for me because there's as Estrella, when we came on, we had a joint venture with Cliffs at the time, and I knew nothing about the backstory on that, and it was John who was really able to sort of keep me sort of in the loop and how to approach things, because that was right at the time when Cliffs imploded. So it was a bit of a tough stretch to navigate. So having John there was fantastic, and of course he's a very good geologist and as you say, very picky. So having that expertise, and still involved, he's still on the board today. In fact, when we put the two companies together, Estrella and Tarsus, the CEO of Tarsus at the time was a fellow named Mark Blythe. Correct. He's also still on the board. So I have the two prior CEOs of both companies still on my board, which I think is pretty rare. Like, you don't get that kind of team very often. Usually when that happens, the old CEO leaves, takes off. Yep. Onto greener pastures, whatever, right? So it's been very good for me to have both of those guys around.
It's an extremely strong team. I don't think it's a coincidence that I mentioned earlier that you're going to be relatively new to a lot of people in this space, but you've been working really hard behind the scenes. I don't think it's a coincidence that you've been able to bring in the types of properties and the quality of properties that you've been able to bring in. I believe you have 6 active projects in 2019. If I'm not mistaken, you have 5 projects that are optioned and or leased, 4 to major companies. Can you speak to that a bit in the priority, Jason?
Yeah, it's interesting. We went through such a bear market, and you're out there, you're showing your projects, and at an early stage, like a company like Alianza is at with its projects. It's some of the hardest work is to bring in those new partners. Absolutely. Especially if you're working in areas that are new. If you're right next to Gold Strike in Nevada, or right near one of the new discoveries in the Golden Triangle here in British Columbia, the sell is obviously easier. But when you're in a bear market where there's not a lot of activity in areas that you can really sort of get a story behind, you're now doing it all on the technical story, the geological story that you can put together. And sometimes, you're limited by the amount of data you have because these are very early stage projects. So we spent a good 3 or 4 years putting together data on projects and going out when we could scrape enough money together and collecting a bit more data and hopefully add to the story that we were building. And then we take that to somebody else and show it to the next major group. And I really try, it's not that I don't like doing deals with other junior companies, but I try to stick more to the mid-tiers, the producers, and even up into the majors, because what I can get from a partnership from them is usually access to expertise. And so I really value that in a relationship. And that's one of the reasons I like the joint venture business model as much as I do, is I can, with my team, take projects to a certain level, and then I can tap into this, not only the funding that they bring to the table, but the expertise that they may have in-house or have available to them externally. You think of it this way, and this has happened in my projects in Nevada, partnered with Hochschild. We need somebody to help us unravel the stratigraphy on one of our projects. There's 3 or 4 or 5 different people I could call, but they might not give me the time of day.
Sure.
But if Hochschild gives them a call and says, hey, we've got some projects we want you to help out on, they take that call. And so that's one of the advantages of having these partnerships with these, especially the producers. So, but that work, as I said, it's very time consuming. It's very difficult, and sometimes it comes down to the concept of how organized is your data. And I got this comment again this weekend with being down in Nevada with our partner that we really value how good of shape your data is in, and it's nice to get that little reminder every once in a while, because when you're doing the work and you're putting the data together, if it's not in a good shape, you go to show it to somebody else, they look at it and they're like, I got to sift through all this. They won't spend the time to do it. They'll go look at the next project that's got a good data set that they can dive into, and they can assess very quickly whether they want to go any further with it or not. So we spent a lot of time putting old data sets together, compiling them, put them into good shape so that we had a product that we could then go sell. And that's a lot of the work that we did through the bear market. We also picked up some other projects. Our Haldane project in the Keno district of the Yukon. That's a project we just brought on last year. And you compare that with our Nevada projects we've had in the portfolio for 4 years now, I think. And so it's a bit of a balance. It's taking stuff that you already have in your portfolio, keeping on building the story, but then also bringing some fresh new stuff in, because you got to flush the portfolio clean every once in a while. Projects aren't moving, they're not going anywhere. Maybe it's time to let them go, and you bring something else in that you can move forward.
Let's talk a bit about those projects and provide a bit of context. You mentioned Hochschild, of course, and you have 3 active sediment-hosted gold projects. Is that right, that you've optioned to them?
Yes, we have 2 that you could call on the southern end of the Carlin Trend near Kinross's Bald Mountain mine. That's our Bellevue and BP projects. They're probably 15 and 40 kilometers from the Bald Mountain mine. And then the third project is one called Horse Thief, which is further to the southeast, almost at the Utah border, near a little town called Pioche, Nevada. And that one is a sediment-hosted target, but it's an off-trend sediment-hosted target. There's no defined Carlin Trend or any of the other major trends in Nevada. It doesn't sit on any of those. It's sort of a new area, which I sort of alluded to earlier. Those are, when you're putting together a project like that to sell, it can be difficult because you don't have the context around it to say, well, there's this mine here 10 kilometers away and this mine 4 kilometers away. It's the same geological settings, stratigraphy, everything for your sales pitch. So, but I would say Horse Thief is our most, it's the highest priority project we have with the Hochschild joint venture, and that's the one that we're pushing to get some drilling done. I don't know if we'll get it done this year now, but if we don't get some drilling in by the end of this year, it'll be early next year on that project.
You did just finish some drilling at your project in the Keno district in the Yukon. Can we speak to that? Because I believe that assays are anticipated, in the next few weeks?
Yeah, and this maybe it's a good sort of time to set up sort of the other angle of our business model, and that while we're biased towards the joint venture business model, both Mark and I feel that having a project that you can run with yourself, have a little more control over timing, news flow, targeting, everything. It's kind of nice to have one of those in the portfolio. And for us, that's our Haldane project in the Keno district of the Yukon Territory. And the timing was kind of nice on that, in that we picked the project up a year ago. probably a year and a half ago, I guess now. And of course, with silver, the price of silver coming up, interest in the project has actually been very strong. We've had a fairly easy time raising money for it. So we set out to do our own drilling this year. We did small trenching and groundwork program in June, sort of refined some of our drill targets, started drilling in sort of mid-August, finished it up about a week ago. Crews left just about a week ago, left the site, and drilled 4 holes on 3 different targets. 2 of the target areas were brand new, had never seen a drill hole before, and the 3rd area we drilled has had a grand total of 13 holes into it before. So it's very early stage project, but it sits in a district, in the Keno district, that's produced over 220 million ounces of silver in its almost 100-year history, and is just starting to come to life again with the work that Alexco Resources has done on their Keno package, revitalizing some of the old mines that are on their property, but also making some significant new discoveries that are going to be deposits in their new mine plan. They're just waiting for their last permit to get their mining operations underway there. So it's a great place to be if you're looking for silver. It's got quite a nice, I say simple geological story to look for these targets. Doesn't mean they're necessarily easy to find, but the story is simple, and once you're on to one, there is knowing what you know from the rest of the district. I think there's real strong possibility that more discoveries are going to be made up there outside the Alexco land package, and we feel Haldane's a very, very strong, has very strong potential to be that next discovery up there.
Well, you mentioned the historic production, and I'm looking at some numbers. I think the average production grade was 1,149 grams per ton silver, 5.62% lead, and 3.14% zinc. So if there is a discovery of significance with some tonnage to it, it's probably likely going to be higher grade. Is that correct, Jason?
Yeah, and that's sort of one of the hallmarks of the Keno district, is just that the deposits there have been such high grade producers, and it's really interesting because I can't remember, there's 62 I think different target areas on the property that Alexco has that range from, I guess, showings right up to mined out deposits, and the variation in the styles of mineralization is quite significant. You'll get some that are massive sulfide veins, others are these quartz breccias, and if you were new to the district and you started working on a project, you'd say, well, this doesn't look anything like what they see at Keno. But in fact, some of the variations they see there, it is actually something that they see at Keno. Everybody thinks of it as massive sulfide, galena basically veins that are carrying all the silver. So it's really nice to have that historic exploration and development there that you can sort of lean to. And the Alexco people have been great, sort of sharing information and being very open to the geological community in Yukon, and hosting tours, and you can pull them up and ask questions, and they've been very good to deal with. And so, like on our project, you mentioned high grade. Back in between 1918 and 1927, there was almost 25 tons of over 3,000 grams silver mined from one of the showing areas at Haldane, and another 2 tons of 4,600 grams silver. And both those had over 50% lead with them. So obviously high graded. They went after some high grade pods of mineralization within these veins, but it just shows you that the property can host that high grade mineralization.
The next catalyst, obviously, drill results from that project. When do we anticipate those?
So we drilled 4 holes as I said, 3 separate areas. So the first target area, well, I'm expecting the results from that hole to be in the next week to 10 days. I guess we're nearing the end of September here, so I'll say early October. And then the rest of the results would follow sort of week to 10 days each after that. It's my best guess on lab turnaround time.
Good. I see insiders own approximately 15% of shares. What does the share structure look like?
So it's about 81 million shares outstanding right now, and I believe it's 125 million shares fully diluted. That 15% share ownership is insiders, and then there's another 30% held by very close associates of the company, and it's of that 81 million shares, there's almost 50% of that is held by very close group to the company, and then even outside from that, there's probably another 10 to 15% of I just call very supportive shareholders who've been with us for a long time now that still hold their shareholding. So it's, even though you look at it and say, it's 81 million shares, it is still fairly tightly held. And I think you see that in our trading sometimes. There isn't a lot of trading that goes on, although that's changed during the last sort of 6 to 8 weeks with all the activity and the gold and silver price.
Well, I got to think that the trading volume has ticked up also because of the opportunity with the new supportive macro environment with gold and silver moving higher. What's the market cap look like?
Well, today, sitting around 7%, we're a $6 million market cap, which obviously as a CEO, I think is very low. I'd like to see that much higher. But as you say, we still are relatively unknown, and we're just starting to get on the radar screen of a lot of people, and that how that goes. It's people take time, get to know you, get to know the stock, the story, what you're doing, and
6 years later, you become an overnight success.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Overnight success in 6 years. You know what? And if you can do it in 6 years, you're doing pretty good.
That's right. Well, you're awaiting assays. I know you have to be excited about that. I'm looking forward to chatting again, Jason, to follow up on those assays. And of course, we can talk about what's next at that point. Anything else that you'd like to add?
No, I think we covered a lot there. I think the opportunity right now is, as an investor myself, I look at some of the other groups that I really like, and you can see a lot of room for movement to the upside. And I think for investors who aren't necessarily fully invested into the gold and silver space, right now is such a good time. And I think we're in for a nice market here, and I think the timing for our company in particular is very good. So I just really pleased with the way everything's come together, and then the uptick in the market to bolster that. I think it looks good for us going forward. Agreed.
Much like real estate, a lot of the money is made buying right, and I got to believe at 7 cents Canadian and a market cap where you're at, it's a pretty opportune time to take a look and do a little bit of due diligence. Jason, I'm looking forward to chatting as soon as those assays come in, and thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime. Thanks, Gerardo.